Okay, so there's a little bit of background. Um, and that's a lot. That's actually uh at Lowell Elementary School here in town, which has been kind of the flagship for Drum Power since I got here in 2010, and where my own children attended. And my two children were in that video some, mostly because I knew if they were appearing on camera, it would be okay. Whereas usually you have to get a lot of permission for all the other students. Um, Okay, so for me, reclaiming West African culture has been really to seek, um, to seek out opportunities, um, to build knowledge and skill. Click again. Thank you. Um, and in seeking, I was looking for opportunities to grow, to learn a new artistic form, and then to then share that with other folks. And one of the avenues for sharing is with Drum Power. As a professional musician, still am for a long time, so it's been sharing that way too. But I'm going to start by actually sort of orienting you to my own personal background, so you can understand sort of what that journey has been, what it's meant, and then how it overlays to the journeys that the young people are taking through Drum Power. So, how many folks in here are PhD students? There's one person. Okay, and maybe some aspiring PhD students and some other folks who have PhDs, right? Okay. So you may recall, and some of you will learn that often when you write not just a dissertation, but other types of research, you'll have some sort of statement to sort of acknowledge your own background and gives the reader of whatever you're publishing some entry into understanding a little bit about your perspective on it. So I'll read you what I had written for mine, and it's still true because most of these are facts. So I'm an African American, and my pronouns are he, him. I was born and raised by Black nationalist parents on the South Side of Chicago until high school, roughly, and spent 2 years, as you saw in the video, in Liberia from 1975 to 1979, which was, in fact, during the first military coup. And I had a very menacing collection of M16 rounds that I had found in the streets during that time. But that said, I also experienced the power of West African cultural traditions then. And prior to that, my father worked in the Netherlands, Antilles, in Bonaire, off the coast of Venezuela. And so that was another time to just see another part of the world. I went on to attend the National Cathedral School for Boys in Washington, which is also called St. Albans, which was an elitist prep school, essentially. Coming out of Southside Chicago, where I finished middle school, that was a heck of an adjustment. I was coming out of a Catholic school, St. Thomas the Apostle, which is right on the edge of the University of Chicago, because my mother was actually getting a PhD while raising my sister and I. And I was probably, I don't know, maybe top 95th percentile of my class. And then I got to DC and I was like, essentially had to take math in eighth grade with eighth graders in the lower school because I hadn't had all these classes that all the kids had already had. And as a pretty gifted athlete and person of African descent, that wasn't super easy. But got through that. Completed undergraduate studies here, actually UW-Madison. In fact, I taught some classes in Ingram years ago. I don't know if I had Professor Macquart's class here. I know he just passed recently, but I did have his class at one point. And I started I got a work study job at the South Madison Neighborhood Center, which is now the Boys and Girls Club on the South Side of Madison. And then shortly after that, moved over to the Wilmar Neighborhood Center. And from that point on, I worked there the entire rest of my college time here, which included a BA in African American Studies and History, double major, and then a master's degree in African American Studies with a history concentration. So I thought I was going to become a history professor. But I also started playing drums very seriously during that time. It was on the video and went on to New York to play professionally. So I lived in Brooklyn for 12 years playing. and created Drum Power, as you heard. Um, while in Bonaire, I can recall still like it was yesterday, romping around the beaches where they had slave huts left over from the Middle Passage where they stopped in Bonaire occasionally. And my sister and I used to go in those little houses that were probably roofs about this tall, and imagine what it was like to be in there. So by the time I got back to Senegal and Gorée Island years ago, it wasn't new. I also marched when Amadou Diallo was shot 41 times in New York City. Can remember that. And feeling the horror of the systemic response to that, and wondered what kind of animal requires that much force. And I can remember the vibration from the first plane crashing into the Twin Towers as I was entering the subway to go to work that day, and wound up walking home from 57th Street and watching the second one on television, and then scrambling around trying to find my brother-in-law the rest of the day, and finally making it back to Brooklyn. Luckily, Manhattan's just not that big of an island, so you can walk it pretty easily. So I spent these years in New York on all the boroughs, starting with Drum Power, first failing to engage very well, and then figuring it out over time, how to be an effective educator. I took a lot of lessons from the youth work that I did to that, because if you can teach students in an after-school program where they're just there to recreate and quote unquote have fun, then you can definitely teach them when they expect to be learning. So I moved to Madison with my own biracial children in 2010 and began Drum Power work here. And I've been tailoring it I had to then tailor it to a much more culturally deprived group, but a much more privileged audience. I still joke with people, there are things that I had to do in New York to get students to engage that probably would have people calling the cops if I did it here. And I'm thankful for that, actually, but also saddened that it's that way in some of these cities. So I entered graduate school with the goal of using what we know about human development and learning through educational psychology and thinking about curriculum and instruction, which is the teaching side, sort of through the lens of my own work, and to think about how programs like Drum Power and others that really try to engage in these skills that people like to say are soft, but I argue allow for any real learning to happen, academic or any other, and think about how that was happening there, how we think about asking intelligent questions about what the cognitive developmental implications are, what the mechanisms that create that are, and then trying to save some other poor souls from having to get a PhD just to ask questions around these kind of non-traditional programs, so that maybe I could support them. So again, back to sharing. So I've stared in the faces of a lot of students who felt that what they're being asked to do in a classroom setting was hopeless for them. And so that's always kind of been an inspiration for me. All right, thank you. So I'll break these each down. So to seek, my family goes back to roots in the United States, one side in Louisiana, the other side in Kentucky, and then both sides wind up in Chicago. And my parents were born in Chicago, and their parents were not. So for me, I was drawn to sort of African art, African traditional things. I was raised with my dad, who was a professional artist and a sort of an Afrocentric Black nationalist person, and my mother, who was down with that too, and a professor at universities, to just think of myself beyond just being an American and even an African American. But I had to seek out what that would be for me. And I always joke, I've been in a lot of situations because I've I've been at this drum for 30 some odd years. And in honesty, I was always a musician, so I have some musical talents, some of which I get genetically. But so I'm in situations where I'm playing with folks who are born in West Africa and then me and performing and so forth. And it's always interesting the attitudes and assumptions people bring to what they think of as authenticity and what is authentic and who is authentic. Um, and I've had the benefit to spend a lot of time in West Africa, in particular, in other parts of Africa too, but to see that life there is not easy. Um, that there are a lot of things that lots of us take for granted that can't be taken for granted there. But it's also the case that um, not being born there doesn't mean you can't hold some of these traditions and move them forward. And actually, the reality is in West Africa now, when it comes to these cultural traditions, the elders are very concerned that the traditions will disappear because a lot of young people don't want to actually continue doing some of this stuff. Um, so, but I like to share my story a bit sometimes just so people understand that, you know, you assume when you see a master drummer from Guinea or Mali, sort of what their path has been. But when they see me, they don't know what the path has been. And I've had to go, again, with a lot of privilege in the United States, but to some lengths to know what I know and do what I do, because it's not right outside my door. And that has meant humbling myself to learn things in a different context, which probably is familiar to some of you, but somewhat swimming upstream. So I think that serves as an example a lot of times for the students that I work with. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the next piece of it for me is to study and grow, which I was getting at a bit. This is Hassan Conte here. He is the artistic director of the Conqueron West African Dance Company group. I'm still a member of. It's based in DC. He's from Senegal. Actually, one of his parents, I think, is from Senegal, Dakar area, and the other is from Gambia, which is not super uncommon for that area. He's definitely one of the two most well-regarded African dance teachers in the United States for sure, possibly the world. He's starting to become an elder now himself. But a lot of what I learned around these traditions, I learned from sort of sitting at his feet. And I have this image of him, but that also includes others like Medoune Yacine Gay, who's my drum teacher, who was the music director, kind of around for a long time, and Abdou Kunta, who was there before him, and Manju Mara, who's here in town from Guinea, who is my brother, but I played next to a lot and learned a lot of those traditions from him. So all that's to say that, studying and growing means connecting with people and, understanding that the first times that I went to West Africa or got serious about it, I realized very quickly that, I can make it about the drums or I can make it about the people. And for me, the choice is easy to make it about people because culture is what people do. It's not just learning some cool music. All right. So I also really have wanted to continue understanding how this work continues to impact young people and what these concepts to seek, to share and grow can mean for them. So one way of thinking about the sharing for me beyond just my general experience was this is a framework that I designed that actually really is a framework for mobilizing social emotional learning, right? And for me, it meant taking the drumming experiences and structuring it in such a way that students could not only learn these traditions, not only celebrate and understand some different cultures and cultural norms around, again, bringing humility to something, not making it about being in service of the community rather than service of yourself as an individual, which is very much an African concept. Um, and so, and this is really designed for anyone who wanted to teach anything, but it was a form of sharing for me. So first, the step to select skills, that to be clear on what the skills are folks are going to be learning and competencies. For me, that was leadership, community, and discipline, as you heard in the short video. And to then translate those into ideas that young people would understand, which that step of translation is a conversation. It isn't me just defining them. And the definitions that I actually have for discipline, leadership, and community developed over many, many years. For example, discipline, which you'll see when I get to the next slide, is using your energy for good. Well, that came from a young person who had a karate class that his sensei said it was using his energy for good things. I was in New York, and in the ultimate act of appreciation, I stole that from my own and been using it ever since. It's a very simple thing. So to translate into a sort of a shared language, shared understanding, but then to make it about action, right? Using your energy for good things, doing something. You know, if you walk in a lot of classrooms, you'll see stuff like respect on the wall, or, you know, various things. And I always ask students and teachers alike, well, okay, what does that look like in action? How do students know? How do they recognize it? So everything is, an action for not just students, adults too, and especially because we're modeling this for them. And then finally, that all that work is directed at youth empowerment, to self-sufficiency, to helping students find their own voices and find their commitments and find a way to what's important to them, rather than what we think they need. Next slide, please. So the result for that process for me, but anybody can go through that process with different ideas, different goals, arrive at different pillars even. So talked a little bit about discipline. Community is supporting my own learning and learning of others. If you make it a little less education-y, it could just be supporting myself and others. And that's very intentionally chosen because most of us know what it is to be a member of some community, if we're lucky. But most of us are fortunate to know that. And so then the conversation with young people was just about, what does that mean to you? What do you give to the community? What does the community give to you? Is that a smooth process? What does it look like? How do you navigate it? How do you ask for things, but also sacrifice things? And then find the leadership, sort of a higher level thing. Again, trying to get to self-sufficiency, trying to get to what I would say is intrinsic motivation, right? You come to my classes, students will tell you, Mr. Lashley, don't do rewards. Or Dr. Lashley, whatever they call me. And that's because, you know, if they're ultimately not doing it because they believe it's right, then what are we doing? So these are the pillars and sort of what this has resulted in for me to this point. Next slide, please. So, this is just an image from the camp. So the camp was mentioned in the video. I started the Drum Power Camp in 2011 here in Madison, mainly because I brought two children who identify as African American and quickly figured out that there wasn't really anything in an artistic space that was non-Western here for them to learn or do. And since I had 15 years at least experience creating just those sorts of projects, I had no choice but to make it for them here, and then make it for other students to benefit too. I didn't mention, and I don't think it was in the bio, I ran an enrichment program at a charter school in Harlem for 10 years, that was academics by morning, and then physical education and visual and performing arts by afternoon. And so I was sort of the principal of the school for half the day, and ran and hired a bunch of folks. And we had, while I was there, it was 17 classes a day, 31 different instructors. And so that's how I got into professional learning, professional development stuff, because I suddenly had a staff of folks that I had to help be effective, become more effective, better support young people and families. So this is the last camp picture. I did not run camp last year for the first time since I've been in Madison. So that was 10, 11 years, something. Maybe it's longer than that. Well, I said it was 15. So yeah, 15 years. Because my daughter is a senior in high school. My son is a sophomore. My daughter was actually teaching at the camp the year before a little bit, helping assign Conte because he had to leave early. But he came all the way here to teach at the camp. And so with her leaving the house soon, my son reminded me once. He was like, hey, he's only got one more year at home. And I was like, maybe I need to rethink camp and be around and be able to do stuff in the summer with you guys. So I've been doing that. So it won't be camp this year either, but it may start up again once Nelson's through. Okay, so if we move to the next slide, please. I want to just show a little bit about what it means to seek, study, and grow and share as a loving community, and be accountable to each other, and what that's meant for the young people. So this is a mural that we did. You might recognize it. That's the side of Overture, right off of State Street. Can't think of what the name of that street is, but the one around the corner. I think that Fontana is on. But in any event, when there were so many protests and art on State, I have friends that invited us to possibly consider doing a mural. I'm not a visual artist. I used to like to draw some, but I never really developed that skill. But this is what we created. The next slide, please. Thanks. And so we took these ideas, community leadership discipline, and decided to try something beyond music, and even in some ways beyond art. The mural itself was designed mostly by the students, and they're all drum power students. Some of them were drum power students who had moved on and weren't in the group anymore, but I invited them to come back and be a part of this if they wanted to, if they were in town. So this is an image of us actually making the art. As you'll remember, it was during COVID, so we still wear masks. This piece of the mural is Black folks whose lives had been lost at the hands of police gunfire. It's a lot of people, and that wasn't even all of them. And I had some friends, folks, so I think one of his historian helped me out with some digging around this because it's kind of a moving target, unfortunately. We click more. We go back. Sorry. And then that is one of our students just tracing out the image of the Drum Power logo, which is a man loosely patterned after me, faced with his fist raised. That is the Drum Power stop, look, and listen signal. It tells students when we need to just come to complete silence and focus, that where something important is about to be shared, and they need to focus with their eyes and ears. So we do this. You saw the students from the camp were in that same, because that's what we use to get everybody's attention and bring the group sort of to order and gather. And usually at the top, it says Drum Power. But I chose the signal for a lot of reasons. Obviously, it is a little bit of a throwback to Black Power, although I've only had one student in the 25 years that I've done this say Black Power when we did it. So that's not, adults think of it, but the students don't necessarily. But so we went back to Black Power just for this version. And so this is an image of just all of us with the names of all the students who participated. That's Tom Ross, who helps me with the drum power group and teaches a lot of Afro-Brazilian. I'm actually one of the founding members of the Amphibians. I don't know if any of you heard of that group. They're a Brazilian samba troupe that started here in the mid 90s, I guess. And I'm one of the original members. There are a number of us who went on to be professional musicians and go other places. The thing would have died if it had just been left to us, but it's still going now because subsequent musicians came and continued it and continued it. Tom was one of them. But and in this image is my mom and my partner and a few other folks. Next slide, please. So this just gives you a full view of how it turned out in the end of the whole thing. We see you. We are one. And I didn't, I let them do whatever they wanted. I was like, well, work together. That was what I told them. That was pretty much it. And they came up with all those images. And then some of this was my baby. And we talked, there's a little bit of history here because that's where I come from in terms of thinking about the world, beginning as slave patrols in the South and immigrant control in the North. Police forces were not really designed for public safety. So that's something a lot of people don't really understand. But I think it's an important thing to remember. Next slide, please. All right. So as we wrap the formal portion, I just want to remind you. So for me, I think of this work of, reclamation is symbolic, but also literal for me in some ways. And I think it's been a reclamation for the students too, to reclaim some Africanisms, whether they understand them or not fully in terms of historically, but to, humble yourself to learn something, to be communal and selfless in a way that really isn't of our culture. And to bring that to African traditions. It's a journey to find what's important and consult elders and understand that even hardships and struggle teach valuable lessons and confer valuable knowledge. And that's a concept that I think a lot of cultures have, but certainly one that is African as well and is present there. And it's a form of study that leads to growth, and that we are meant to share the things that come to us rather than just gather them for ourselves. So that's my formal presentation today. I'm gonna play the drum a little bit just so you can hear it, just so you won't know that I'm some crazy guy who's talking about the thing and not doing the thing. If it's too loud, I'm sorry. I'm not that sorry, but I always say you either run from it or to it, but not much in between. There's a lot of power. I try to make sure I'm still on camera. I had peeked that earlier. Oh, you got me covered, huh? So I'm right on time. 40 minutes, almost at the dot. Are there questions? I'm allowed to take questions, right? All right. You guys know I'm a teacher, right? So I'll start calling on people.
I don't have a question, but when we were in Botswana, Forty Falls, it's the name of the places that we went that evening for cultural music and food and whatnot. And they actually had small drums and everybody in the room played and it was
Yeah. I've been to Botswana, but I didn't do any drumming there. But I have one Botswana story. It was pretty unforgettable, not too complicated, but I was riding down the street in a car and I see something out the corner of my eye. We weren't like in the middle of the city, so we're like kind of in the middle between rural and not. And no lie, I saw an orangutan just scurry across, like full grown. So that was pretty amazing. But yeah, Southern Africa's amazing places. It's great that you get to go there. Yes.
Do you mind speaking a little bit more about how like your experience living in Liberia for 2 years when you were a kid kind of, I don't know how much it shaped you, but like how significant, if that was significant in your life, and like kind of what it did, I guess.
Yes.
So because that question kind of like similar to what somebody asked online.
Oh.
So the person asks that what brought you and or your parents to Liberia?
Well, okay. So then I'll talk about how it shaped me. So yeah, we were in Liberia because my parents were in the Peace Corps as volunteers. My mother was doing some kind of teacher training type of thing, and my father was teaching carpentry and leather crafts, and some visual arts. And it was 2 years between when I was 5 and 7, right? Most people can't remember much stuff that happened when they're 5 and 7 when they're in their 50s. But I can, because it was pretty different. It shaped me in a lot of ways. I mean, it was interesting because it was just a completely new environment. But I remember culturally, I probably was shaped more by the arts and music stuff that I saw there than anything, because it was just so new, but also so vibrant. There were dances. I mean, we were in Bendu town. I don't know if any of you have been to Liberia, but Bendu is one of the smaller villages. And Monrovia is the capital. We lived there some, but we were all over Liberia. And we were Bendu, and I'll never forget, they had some dances that we saw that were the dances happening in the community. They weren't performances. And some of them were scary. You know, folks were dancing with machetes and raffia outfits, and you couldn't see people's faces, you know, and beautiful all at once. I learned to still appreciate the food from that time at an early age. So I would say it shaped me in a sense that it just broadened the worldview for me at an early age, and made me understand that there are lots of different people living lots of different ways. And when you have that experience at that young an age, sort of definitely colors your lens. I think it does that at any age, but I think when you're young, it really is formative, which is actually why I took my own children to Senegal a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago, because it was a trip I've been dreaming of since they were born and saving for quite a while too, because it's not cheap. You know, because that's formative. And it even has a different impact if you've been raised to think that there are things in Africa that should make it be home to you in some ways. Other questions? Yeah.
I have a question about engaging students. And you mentioned that there's kind of a trial and error or a learning curve when you first started Drum Power. I'm wondering if you could share some of your successes or maybe some of your failures during and trying to engage students in that way.
Man,
As a former teacher, I'm always looking for things.
I mean, I got a lot. I feel like I could go on and on about what works, but I actually think people probably learn more in some ways about what didn't work. I'll start with saying that teaching to me is very much a know thyself type of exercise. A lot of folks don't really understand that if you don't go into it with a real awareness, I mean, no real awareness, not like, well, I think, but like that it's been shown to you that you are strong in certain things, not so strong in other things, that there are elements of your personality that lend themselves well to the work, and there are elements and sensitivities that you have that don't mesh well in that work, and that you have a plan to deal with both. So I think, so that necessarily means that no one's good at first, like nobody. And when people go and observe people who've been teaching a long time, they think, oh, it's magic. Look, they just got it. And they don't see the little things. And they certainly don't remember, they don't see the time of struggle. So I guess, recommendation or reminder I would give, just especially we're talking about folks who are new to the work, is just we can learn to treat the failures as real opportunities to learn every time, and start to grow and develop some thick skin to make it not personal. That when every student is not only not engaged, but like lashing out, cussing you out, whatever it is they're doing, that is a call for help. And that is a statement of them telling you that they need something. Same as I can remember when my dad told me once when my daughter was like a couple of weeks and I wasn't sleeping. Maybe, well, I didn't sleep for like the first 9 months with her. But so it was somewhere in there. She was really little and I was tired and I was frustrated. And I was like, why is she crying? He looks, she's just trying to tell you she needs something. But it's the same thing, with young people. They don't always have the words. There's a cycle that I see often with helping teachers, because I've gotten to do a lot of professional development. First, things don't go right. They think it's them and they need to figure it out. Then things continue not to go well. They think the kids can't do it. And then, so when I'm supporting educators, I always am paying attention to which one of those belief cycles are they in? Where are they at in the cycle of this thing? We got a lot of teacher burnout now because we're not supporting young teachers in the right way. But when I notice that they don't believe the students can do it, I don't keep giving them things to try. I say, here, I'll do it. I'll show you that they can still do it. And then I teach them. And I tell them, it's going to be easier for me than it is for you, because you have to reinvent yourself now because you've been doing some things a certain direction and now you got to change. They meet me for the first time and I'm gonna run it down the way I know it needs to the first time around. But then at least they see that the students can in fact do it. And then we start back. Okay, now they're back to, okay, it's me. I need to figure this out. But, yeah, and sometimes it's just beyond what you can do. But yeah, I could go on and on about teaching. So I'm gonna stop at that. For now, unless you want to ask another question. Are there others? Yes.
First, thank you so much for this wonderful talk. I was really interested in something that you said about Madison as a city being both very privileged and while I'm new to this community, I just came here, I'm interested in hearing more about that. I think I understand what you're referencing, but what do you think that this community yeah, it's a big question. It's the Brown Tower campus really inspiring and I think satiating this cultural deprivation, but what else do you think is
Yeah. Well, and I'll start with that, but now I'm not offering it. And I felt the weight of that a little bit. But I crafted a letter that I sent to all the families, telling them what I was doing and why. And most everybody, I got some lovely responses. People saying, thanks for modeling what it is to care for your own. rather than feel like you need to bear the burden of everyone else. I, I told myself when I moved to Madison from Brooklyn, because I knew what I was getting into. I lived here before as an undergrad and graduate student, that one, I was not leaving New York to find a better place. I was leaving New York to find a different set of positives and a different set of negatives. And I got that. And I was tired of like trying to argue, out compete everybody for every bit of space in New York City, even as I miss, it still feels more like home culturally than probably anywhere I've ever lived. So it's tough to say what a place needs, because ultimately what a place is defined by the people who live there. So I literally come down to telling you what kind of people need to move to Madison, right? I do think there are some things we can think about in terms of resources. For example, there have been several Black or African American bars that have attempted to have entertainment over the last 15, 20 years, and all of them have closed almost. You got now Gamma Ray, which is owned by an African American guy. I think that might be it. If you look around and you go, well, where are all the Black people hanging out socially? Y'all know? I don't know. Besides church. So if there were initiatives to support some of these things, it could be different. Where are folks who are of African descent hanging out besides the mosque? Or maybe campus student organizations. Like, that's crazy. You go to most major cities, there's places. So there's some sort of basic things like that. We haven't invested, people used to try to compare Madison to Austin all the time, right? Like, oh, Madison is just like Austin in the Midwest. No, it's not. Austin poured millions of dollars into the arts in community-based sorts of ways. Madison has never done that. So I'm not a basher of Madison. I live here. There are plenty of things I benefit from. That ain't one of them. That's all. Other questions? You have another? Yeah.
Thank you so much. Can you please speak more on the values of non-Western art education in a place like that?
The values of non-Western art education. What kind of, would you be, when you say, who are the people in non-Western art education that we'd be referring to and thinking about that? Like, we're talking about the higher ed level, we're talking about communities?
Communities, higher ed, K through 12, just broadly.
A non-Western art education. Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that a little bit. I don't know that would be the line out. Well, let me just say, in thinking about that idea, I think the most important distinction I would draw, unfortunately, I think it's definitely true in terms of, you can draw a line between Western and non-Western, for sure, in terms of art education, because the aesthetics that are esteemed, right, are going to be affected by a choice like that, right? Like, I mean, average student making art in school doesn't even learn about African art or even African American art. They're doing a better job now. I've seen with my own children that they've been, I think but again, we look at systems. You can go through middle school in Madison, Wisconsin and never take a visual art class. Let me say that one more time. You can go through middle school in Madison, Wisconsin, never take a visual art class. And in fact, taking a visual art class is in direct competition with orchestra, choir, band. So if you do decide that you want to actually have an artistic experience between 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, you need to not take one of those other ones. You can't do both. And my son was I think had to potentially be a gifted visual artist, but he also is good at violin and some other stuff. So he hasn't gotten to take them. So I think, so my point is, yes, within Western, non-Western, there's some important distinction in terms of, what examples will be held up. But I also think that it's really about arts versus non-arts is the first place to fight this battle, because the arts themselves are just not a valued thing. The systems are not in place to support exploration for students that way. I'm pushing in with drum-powered schools. I've gotten to the point now where I could get as much work as I possibly could probably do in Madison if I wanted it. But that's mostly due to my New York hustle and years in the game. I'm just being real with you. And there are not avenues actually to help people think about using something like these sorts of tools to really engage, and certainly not do it with a lens toward non-Western art. You have to figure that out on your own, and then swim upstream. If you like if you're an art teacher at schools, you could do some of this. There's some Black art teachers that I know here in Madison that have done a very nice job, but I don't know that there's a lot of curriculum in place to support that. But there's not a lot of curriculum to support the arts in general. So I don't mean to evade the question, but I do think, that question, I would address it differently if I was in New York or somewhere, a city where it was like more, where there's just more cultural experience and awareness. Then I think we could really have a distinction about that. I will say that we're still a place where, they're banning certain Native American books from schools. So we're talking about literacy as an expansive category is something you got to argue for. So what does that tell us about the arts, which we already don't value at the level of the other academics? So I'm sorry to answer a question with a question, but I do think that's my way always, is to ask a lot of questions to make progress. That's what I'm saying. Yes.
Can you please just give us some advice on, designing effective community engagement programming, and what you think would be
What kind of programming did you say?
community engagement program,
Community engagement programming.
and how to make this program successful?
I hate to be obvious, but I do think there's a mixture of passion and expertise that you need. And when I say expertise, I don't mean the person who knows the most, but the person who actually, one, has the content knowledge, but also has the pedagogical content knowledge. Not just the content, but also how to teach, how to engage. When I pull the drum out with kids, I know they're not going to care. When I was in New York, it was even worse. Like they have all these assumptions around what it is to be African, and most of them are negative. But they're not going to deny what I do with the drum in front of them and not be impacted by it. I'm not saying everybody has to be an expert on everything, but you need to know the thing where you are expert and lead with it. And that goes for teachers as well. It's like your general education, you got to teach math, science, reading, all the different subjects, for example, if you're in elementary school. But you have hobbies and passions that can be used, let's say, as project-based learning, to have those, to elevate those subjects in a way that's real for you. That is the thing that connects, that people connect to. And finally, also to value the relationships, that if you're doing outreach, the valuable thing is being able to build relationships with the people that are in front of you. That goes with how you negotiate or talk about what you're going to bring, but then obviously still has to carry through with what you actually do, once you get there. So that is the ability to sort of meet people where they're at and make a pathway and open doors rather than close them.
All
All right, thank you. I really want to know more about all the folks in the room.
Oh.
Are most of these folks in the African Studies program?